Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 10th episode of the Bringing Light to the Darkness series. Thanks for joining me. I am Rebecca Rose, and happy to be with you again. I'm happy to be recording again before year's end, and it's actually 31st December as we speak. The light is beginning to wane on the final day of 2021. I feel a sense of upliftment about what's coming in for us in 2022. It feels like the energies are bringing or shifting, the shifting tides, shifting energies, shifting alliances, I feel, that will reveal more to us in this year ahead. I'm very curious about that. And talking about something I've received along those lines midway through our journey today. These recordings, these videos are a bit of a journey, aren't they? We move through a lot of territory, and we'll be going into some, unfortunately, we'll be moving through some darkness, but the purpose of the whole series is, like I said, bringing light to that and bringing things that have been hidden into the open and sharing my experience in the hope that it can help liberate all this heavy, dense, distorted energy from our planet. Before I say that, I will invite you guys to sign up for my mailing list. The link is below to that, so you can learn about what's coming and where I'm appearing and so on and so forth. If that appeals to you, link below to sign up for the mailing list, the newsletter. And also, I was recently on with Nicole Frolick on Enlighten, and as well as Laura Eisenhower with the Conscious Vitality channel. There, I will link those below as well. Conscious Vitality, you do need to have a monthly subscription to check that out. I think they do offer a week-long freebie membership if you want to go that route. And I'll be at the Secret Space Conference in May, which is sponsored by Journey to Truth. So that is May live. We'll be just north of St. Louis in a really pretty area, forest and water and so on. So I'm looking forward to that. Just a little, sort of logistical, practical things there. Well, I feel nervous again. This first bit, we're going to go back to Mars and pick up a little bit where we left off, talking about the mantid. I call them the mantid wars. I totally recommend going back and getting some of my backstory in previous videos. If you haven't watched any of these videos before and you're just here for the first time, welcome. There's a lot to the story. But in a nutshell, I would say I was used in what is commonly called the Super Soldier program, among many other programs. So hence, that's why I'm talking about wars on Mars and kind of combat missions there. The Super Soldier moniker, I kind of prefer to call it, instead of a super soldier, probably a psychic combat slave would be more the terminology that I would choose to use, or a Delta slave. So I was speaking on the mantid labyrinth. We within Mars Defense Force were doing a lot of offense missions, trying to get at the heads of the mantid society. I would call them mantid elders, and they had a very elevated kind of high frequency labyrinth below ground. And as I said in the last video, not just like skanky caveman caves that they were living in. These were very elevated. There was an energetic opulence to their domicile, and it was a kind of feeling of a labyrinth when we would go in there. And it was protected by a kind of frequency fence. And it was also, my impression has always been that it was made upon the remains of a much more advanced civilization that had been there long ago and been abandoned. And the mantids came in at some point and settled there. Really fascinating to me. This part is really, there's a beauty to it, and a beauty to the mantid race. They never seem to want to create havoc with us until they realized that we were targeting them. So they began eventually to fight back. But I'd mentioned the challenge for me to locate memory around actual battles. you know, and for those, again, for those of you who are new, I am still in process, and I will be for many years with all the many experiences that happened to me over many, many years in the programs. So I realized this is oh gosh, this is hard. I realized another challenge to memory retrieval about the battles on Mars and elsewhere, and that's that I actually had a psychic twin that I was trauma bonded with and sent into Mars with. I knew nothing about this. In fact, oh, my voice is kind of cracking a little bit there. I was asked this on in an interview at some point in time, like, did you have a counterpart in the programs at any point? And I went, no, I don't know anything about that. And in fact, that is very true. I didn't know anything about it. And this is really pivotal to my story on Mars. So let me unpack that a little bit here. It's really fascinating and also beautiful and terrible at the same time, and you'll see why. So I'll tell you how I met my twin. I'm pausing to kind of gather myself around all this material and this particular topic. I was out on the land north of here where I go to get away from all the EMF and public land where I don't see anybody, and out in the canyon area and the pinon and the juniper and so on. And I was just walking along. This was in early November. Yeah, first week November, I think. And I was thinking about what was I thinking about? The trees and the flowers. I was thinking about the manted labyrinth at that moment when I was, you know, just walking along by myself at dusk. And thinking about the tech there, the frequency fence and the technology of a different sort. We're not talking about craft and weaponry, but something entirely different and very elevated. I was thinking about that. And I felt this male presence behind me, and not in physical, in non-physical. So in the etheric, I felt a guy behind me in a protective presence, neutral, but also protective and not nefarious in any way, not negative. I just went, okay. And then I felt him kind of on either side of me. So the sort of an embrace, if you like, of his energy. And I was like, what is this? It's so familiar. I don't know. I could see very clearly, very detailed, his height and his build and his hair and receding hair. And my age now, I'm seeing him, his aspect as he is at this moment. And the signature was not of someone passed out of body, not a dead person, but someone very much still alive on this earth right now. The t-shirt, the model blue, and the jeans and the shoes, moccasins, and very laid back, super laid back energy. And his face was all pixelated, like of everything. It's like everything was almost like photographic in what I was seeing, but his face was like blurred out. That was a little frustrating, but it was interesting. And as I walked along, the message I received was, he said, "You saved my life. You saved my life. You're a hero." I'm not sure that's true, but whatever. That was the message. You saved my life. And I went, oh, this is definitely, and I felt like it was space program Mars energy, especially because at the moment that I perceived him behind me, I was thinking about the mantic caverns. So much unfolded in the days and nights that came after, and the weeks, and slowly gathering more from him in both his higher self aspects and other aspects, which I'll talk about. But also through it began to open my memory. And this, I don't think this would have happened if he hadn't come to me. And at the same time, I realized what I would say about why my memory was bound up about the battles is that, and I'm going to go into the twinning part of this, is that actually my memory field is quite literally bound up with his. And because he's in the earlier stages of remembering what happened and kind of putting the pieces together and facing the information, which is difficult at best. Because he's working on that story now, it's allowing me to retrieve more and for us to meet with our energy fields together, or with our minds in a way melded as they were in the programs. So far out, like I didn't know anything about this. Number one, remember, we're not supposed to have any recall of our abductions and our Milab experiences. That's the whole name of the game. So of course, you know, we can't be too hard on ourselves if we can't remember every little bit. That I can remember anything and have gotten into 10 videos on this series, and I'll keep going, is something extraordinary to me, and that it will keep unfolding. I do know that this is just going to keep going. I mean, I feel like in so many ways, like I've just scratched the surface of recovering what happened to me. So we'll call him Dean. We'll call him Dean. And before we were sent to Mars, we were bonded on Earth, trauma bonded in a naval base north of Chicago, pair bonded and psychically pair bonded. And we were kept in cages. And this is monarch mind control. Most of you will be familiar with that. I knew I'd been taken there for something. And then when I got the information about the twinning with him, I knew that that's what it was about. Yeah. I didn't know much about the twinning phenomena when this first started coming in. And at the end of all this, I will read a little bit about what I just dug up yesterday about the Illuminati and how they use the twinning as a psychic control mechanism and a mind control mechanism. And it corroborated everything I'm going to talk about here. Dean and I were doing psychic missions, like psychic recon missions, for example, with the Mantid Caves. We would do, our minds were wed. I mean, it's like almost like our bodies were wed. Our minds were wed, and we could see together more than we could see apart, if that makes sense. It's like the two became one. So before we did, we and our large, it seemed like we were usually in a group of seven of us together were going to do missions from the base with Defense Force. But Dean and I, for whatever reason, were doing the recon to kind of get a look at things and figure out what we needed to do. I mean, everybody within the team, and sometimes even a larger group, had their place. You know, everybody had a skill set, and something, whatever you came in with would be built out in the programs. If it was psychic, if it was, you know, you were a good strategist, or you were, you know, sort of a more thuggish, strongman type of person. And we were all completely altered. I mean, if you look at the other videos, you know, I was cloned, but I was also a cyborg. I mean, I had a lot of componentry that was like off-world metal, off-world technology embedded within my biology. I was chemically, electronically, biologically enhanced. And it's interesting that through Dean, I've been able to see more of what I looked like and what I was wearing. He's got, I've seen his super soldier aspect, combat slave aspect has come to me, and I can see the black, it's kind of a tight black shiny suit with a collar that is sort of comes up around the neck a bit tight, and it's very, very weaponized. Yeah, a hard way to see oneself, or so how, you know, we were trained to care about and love each other, and we were also trained to torture each other. That's part of the program. To get us to comply, they would manipulate us. And it also, you know, when there's someone you love in the mission that you're a part of, you're all there together, you're going to have a really successful mission because you're going to be really well invested in the mission. Whereas if you're just like, you're not bonded to anybody in the team, that's problematic because it doesn't create any union or cohesion within the mission. I hope that makes sense. And I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. This is fairly fresh, and I think that's why kind of nervy feeling about talking about it. There is quite a bit of, yeah, the incredible amount of emotion that exists within this story for him as well as myself. He's come to me as a person very much in pain also, as well as talking to his higher self. I've talked to his, he's come in a heap of just derangement, and sometimes as his teen self, which we were together. We were both about 9. I was 9. I think he was about 9, 10 when we were trauma bonded in this way. We were sexually bonded when we were little. And we aged out there. We were on missions together through our teens and into our 20s, out on Mars and beyond. I don't know the full extent to which I don't think he was with me on other missions beyond that, beyond Mars, and I'll tell you why here shortly. About it's interesting about this as a little aside. What's kind of funny, a friend of mine about the uniforms. A friend of mine I'd revealed some of this story to privately. He said, it sounds like the Winter Soldier from, the comics. Have you ever seen the Winter Soldier from Marvel? I was like, no, I've never looked at any of that. And, he sent me some photos. I'm like, that's totally the uniform. So again, it points at so much disclosure that's happening within like media, entertainment, movies, and all of that, like how things are like, wow, it really is like that. Are you kidding? This has been in front of us for a really long time. Anyway, just a kind of silly aside. Okay, the parts I don't want to talk about. I've heard from a forerunner, let's say, an early testifier, let's say, whistleblower in the SSP community, say that the Mars colonies used a lot of slave labor, and it's run by psychopaths. That is absolutely correct in what my experience was, that I can absolutely corroborate that with what I'm going to reveal. So part of the manipulation and part of the point of the twinning, so that they can manipulate us, is to turn off and turn on certain things in our psyche and our programming, and turn on and turn off pleasure and pain sensations, and to make us torture each other. He was forced to harm me sexually, and other people watched that. And the commanders and controllers were absolutely psychopathic to be this sadistic and have this be part of the program and part of how they worked with us and got us to do their bidding. And remember, we're programmed anyway to have certain commands that they would activate during our missions to make us into what I would call a combat slave, very mission oriented and fearless, and like killers. That's why it's the mind, the Monarch Delta program. That's what that is. That's how I would translate that into the Mars service that we were doing. That was very painful to remember. And he's so bizarre because he's remembering this too. He's recalling the same things. It's like we're getting recall at the same time. And what he told me is that they don't realize that when they send us back to Earth, the twinning remains and the psychic bond remains, and it remains very, very strong. And he has said that also, we still have that bond, and we can use that to heal ourselves. So it's almost like the twins become alters in a way. They're so bonded. It's like, I know in our conversations that there's times when I've not been able to tell who said what, because it's in the same, almost like sharing the same mind stream. And I know that's exactly what happened in the programs. Yeah. So over time, I'm going to unpack a lot more of this. I think because I'm still in process with it, I'm not able to go into the amount of detail I might in the future, but it's been a big discovery for me. So I really wanted to share that. Yeah. A lot of the things that happened with the torment and the torture out there. And by the way, I think I was blissfully ignorant of the amount of psychopathy that went on in the off-world arena. I didn't know that sexual abuse was still part of what was going on Mars. I thought that ended when we were on Earth. No, at least not in my case, in what I experienced. And I feel so like I wish I could stop talking about the sexual abuse, but they use it so handily. It's like one of our greatest gifts and most beautiful powers, right? Our sacred energy that they invert, and they do it with children because it destroys the whole person. When you get at a child and you sodomize the little girl, little boy, you're going to destroy their whole life force energy. It becomes inverted, and then you can control them. At any stage of the game, at any age, sexual abuse is some of the worst you can ever experience. And then when it's coupled with really deviant psychological abuse like this, it's how they train you. So it's hard to continue talking about sexual abuse, but at the same time, as we speak of it, it becomes lighter and it begins to dissipate, I think, not just from me and my experience, but through the collective. And that's really important. So we are indeed bringing light into this rather than amplifying any sense of darkness with it. I think it's hard to hear. It was really hard for me to receive this and start to remember this. I can see why it's been locked up in a vault inside of me. Painful. I mean, I've shared a lot of painful experiences and painful in a different way than what I shared in video 9, which was excruciating, because this was perverting all of the, it's again, the relational wounding, the relational bonding us so that we loved each other and felt like we were best friends, and then making us betray each other is so sick. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's just like, I feel like I should apologize for sharing so many awful things in these videos that are so hard to hear. But I think this is also how we heal. And I'm going to say over and over without apology that I really feel that people need to know what goes on and has gone on. And this was all happening. Like, I was taken to Mars when 1982. So this has gone on for so long. In the end, I've been stalling on this little bit here. I want to share something, not this, other than this. As part of what goes on, and this is often the case, I realize, with a lot of twinning programming, he was forced to kill me in the end. They activated his kill command. So it was, in a way, we could call it his altar that killed me. The combat slave, as if in battle, he killed me. And he's come back and that's when I saw him, like remembering this whole thing unfolding, the wounded and wasted damsel in distress, me dying in his arms. And it was so Hollywood. And him, like the warrior in distress, like, oh my God, what did I do? And he went completely berserk after that, and he was incarcerated on Mars. And it was like they framed him for my murder. I mean, they said it was a total setup. But they do that when, one of the twins will be deemed dispensable, disposable. I am operating, however, under the assumption that, I had other clone backups, and this may have terminated like the original me, and may have, there could be other chapters of this, I don't know, may have allowed the relationship with Dean and I to continue. I'm not really sure right now, but it's still as painful as if, there was only one me and one him. The intense amount of betrayal is like, it's off the charts. And we know, Hitler, I believe, had a fascination with twins, and we can go back to Mengeled's experiments. He was in the SS, and he's been famous as a torturer. All the experiments he did on twins, and psychologically and sexually, physically torturing them and finding out what would happen in the other half of the twin. What happens if I do to person A? What happens to person B if I do this? This is taken out of, the Nazi playbook, and it's also taken out of the Illuminati playbook. So I will share a little bit of notes on what I have read recently about this. Yeah. Wow. It's a lot. I got to pause for a moment. I spoke last time about all the, relational wounding in my life, and this was just like the kingpin of that, right? Yeah, let me pause. Oh, yeah, bracing. I think the light part would be that I keep telling this to Dean, like, we can heal now. We're here and we're alive now. We outlived those programs. We didn't die in the programs. And we're both, almost 50 years old. This is decades ago, and we have our lives to live now. I'm not sure where he is in physical. I do think he is somewhat aware of me, and by some twist of the universe's benevolence, I hope that we can meet in person. I don't know how this is going to roll out, but wouldn't you say this would be a bit shocking to make a discovery like this on your own, for your own journey? It's just blown my mind. So I would also say too that it's brought me to some understanding about the, how do I say this? What's the right words? The men in prison. I've always felt this calling to assist men in prison, and to, just this heartache about the way the justice system works, and it perpetuating trauma, and then wanting to bring light energy, bring healing energy to guys in the system, prison. And I understand where that comes from, because Dean was incarcerated, and I've been following, Julian Assange and his, potentially being extradited to the US. I mean, his story has really triggered me, a lot of emotion in me, and a lot of anguish and anger. And, I know where that comes from. It's really intrigues me how the things that happen in the programs definitely have bled through into affecting my, of course they would, my regular life as Rebecca, and my proclivities here in this embodiment now. It's very relevant. I never quite knew where that came from. And there's a little more of an aside on that, a little extra chapter I'll talk about later on. But I do want to share this, because I think the twinning phenom is actually more common than most of us are aware of, or that even I was aware of. So I want to read just a little bit of clips about what the ideology is here, and what the protocols are for creating the sort of the twins, and what that's all about. And this info is from Svali. Some of you may have heard of her. She was she came out, escaped the Illuminati family thing. And she was herself trained as a programmer. And she's talking about twinning in this document. And she says the twins do everything together. They're taught together. They do military training together. They tell each other secrets. But at some point, they will be forced to hurt each other. If one twin is considered expendable, the ultimate setup will be one in which one twin is forced to die while the other watches. One twin may gather secrets from the other twin and be forced to disclose them to a trainer, and then may be forced to kill the other. And this, I only received after I'd gotten the other information and this is corroborating everything, all the twisted fuckery that I've seen with Dean and I. One twin may be forced to hit or hurt the other. If they refuse, the other twin will be brutalized by the trainer. And remember, this is taken out of the Illuminati playbook. Many setups will involve one twin being forced to betray the other, turning on the other child after intense programming. This betrayal setup will devastate both children, and they will learn the true lesson: trust no one, betray or be betrayed. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a little bracing. And then this little bit here that follows, I'm just taking some key pieces here. This is the following here is from Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler. Cisco Wheeler, I believe, is also from an Illuminati family, talking about the twinning. They will be given identical structures so that they can have the hidden keys to each other's systems. The deeper parts of most systems can't be unlocked without the help of the twins. And mind you, Dean and I were not biological twins and not identical twins in any way or related in any way through bloodline or anything like that. The twins are given jobs and team projects that require the skills of both, especially jobs that require total compliance with the twinning programs in order to survive. And that's very true. We were brought into near-death situations over and over and over and helped each other survive. Hence his initial message to me: you saved my life. They are programmed to be one in body, soul, and mind. They're set up in love-hate relationships. They're sexually mated together. They're telepathically connected. And in the end, though, here's the light. The two twins will unlock each other's deeper systems. They will help trigger and help heal each other. So something to think about with the programs, and I will return to this, I'm sure. I feel like I'm just kind of, in some ways, at the more initial, definitely more at the initial stages of looking into this. But it's like I got a big truckload of stuff all at once, and I was like, it was a bit overwhelming. Yeah. Oh, so thanks for just being with me on that. And I hope it makes sense, what that phenomena is about and why they use that. I think I haven't heard it. I don't listen to tons of testimony, but I have not heard so much about it, but I'm sure it's probably more prevalent than I'm aware of. So let's go into, Mars being run by psychopaths. No, we're done with that. All right, so we're going to go into another story that's it's not dark. It's unusual and unique, and it brings us around into light. Still gathering myself here. Yeah. I gotta share that it's very it's kind of there's an element of frustration or struggle or to be in contact with someone like that in a non-physical way, more telepathically, and not have really any idea about where they are. How is he actually doing? How is he doing in his physical life? My sense with Dean was that he's had a pretty straight life, duty bound to kind of home, family, straight job and all that stuff. And now things have really changed. That was the gist of what I got from him. So yeah, anyway, let's move on to someone else I met. Yeah, someone else I met, non-human, also in kind of non-physical. Yeah. So this, if you guys have been on my newsletter, I've gotten my newsletter the past couple bits, I think I've told you a little bit about Six, who is a tall gray. Don't get freaked out just yet. It goes into good places. Yeah, so again, another I meet beings when I'm kind of, sometimes it's in meditation, but sometimes it's really just like I said, I was walking out on the land by myself at sunset, and this was like late at night. This happens. I'm just sitting there kind of before bed, not exactly in meditation. I think I just had a meal or something. I was just sitting there and oh, there's a tall gray coming in about my 11 o'clock position. There's a tall gray. And I'm like, oh shit, what do you want? And that's not normal for me. Like, I don't, the grays we're done with that contract. Like, they're not coming into whatever, do their funky junk anymore, their mind manipulations and their deceptions. So, but this was, it flew threw me for a bit of a loop. This was also, this is in the past couple months that this has unfolded. And it gives relevance to, I think, what's lying ahead and where certain things are going for us. And he came in his energy. I'm always checking the energy, rather than what unfolds in a conversation, the spoken words. You have to read the energy. Like, I could tell that Dean was protective and at least neutral energy. And the same with Six. He hadn't come across with the name Six. That just kind of dropped into my mind stream during subsequent rounds of communication with him. And I assumed, my assumption was, and it was a limited assumption, but based on my past experience, was like, oh, you're coming in with, to manipulate me in some way, or you want something from me, or you whatever. And I was definitely on the offense. And when I read through my notes about, the initial exchange, I can see we were kind of talking in circles, because I was like, of course, the grays were featured heavily in my very earliest years, and even in utero. The grays were around, and some of you will know that I've identified my father as a Zeta hybrid with ties to Rigel, which is in the Orion system. Not really good grays. I mean, as far as being ultimately service to self and being part of a group that's caused a lot of harm to humanity, in my opinion. But this is really fascinating. It definitely threw me a curveball. Over a few conversations with him, I came to understand that, and I'll read some of this. It's kind of interesting, the dialogue. It's more intricate than I can probably give word to just talking about it. I came to understand that it seems to be that there's a dissolution of some of the leadership within the Orion Gray groups, and that splinter groups, some of which are aligned with light, trending toward light, seem to be forming. This didn't all unfold in the first communication with him at all. So I was very much on defense. I'm like, I don't want your messages. I don't know what you're here for. I don't care. Kind of like, enough. I've done enough of gray stuff. But, and it should be said too, my part of my journey here, from a soul's perspective, is understanding that there's going to be always more to the equation than my limited belief system. And I've talked about this so much on my videos, is drawing myself out into the macro view, into the bigger lens of my own experience as a soul over lifetimes, and certainly through this lifetime, and why I came in to experience so much darkness. So kind of integrating polarity and coming to understand the darkness better, and also leaving the door open for other possibilities that are more light aligned. Yeah, he was originally asking for some help with whereabouts. And this is where I'm going to have to read a little bit of the document. You probably know that I transcribe things into digital after they come out in writing in my journals. But it bears relevance. What follows kind of bears relevance to what I feel is happening in our solar system, which is more light is coming in and more changes are happening that we may not be fully feeling the brunt of now, or the reverberation of at the moment, but that I think we will be feeling in 2022. this is I feel like a harbinger of that. So yeah, what a trip. This is a total trip with 6. A couple of times, not the first meeting, but probably this, I think this is the second time we ended up chatting, and it's all very telepathic. And with 6, I'll be thinking something and he can hear me and he's responding to it. That's how this telepathy goes. It's like I can't hide any thought from him, and he doesn't care. They're not judgmental about what you're thinking. So it's kind of funny. I've related with a lot of groups like that. It's like, it's not like talking to a human, because you can kind of keep obviously we're always keeping our thoughts veiled, but there's total transparency when you're with, some of these beings. And I say to him, I want to rewrite how this story ends, the story of your race and mine, so we're no longer hostages to each other. And that's true, to bring this around to a different kind of conclusion, so that their needs are met and our needs are met, but not so humans are being used and abused and taken advantage of and so on. And I'd asked him where, I was trying to figure out where he was hailing from or where he was coming from. And I received from other higher level guides of mine, I just heard the place of the winged serpent. I took that sort of to be Draco. That was my first impulse or first interpretation of that intuitively. But 6 says, we come from many places at this point in time with different and varying objectives. We mated with other species and thus have arrived at present disturbances and disequilibriums. I think by mated, I think he sort of means used DNA from genetically mutated. We also made gains. I do not know all people in all groups. Some of us are very separate. We are not a family, but far estranged. Numbers dwindle in some groups. There has been infighting, plunder, and death. And again, I'm not reading the whole, it's a 12-page document, so I'm not going to read you guys all that. He says, we are not free of will entirely. We have overseers and take orders. We are largely duty bound to this. Some are renounced if they fail to provide or maintain, punished. In other words, there are those that seek this element of servitude to end. In my group, many have not been allowed to think for themselves. We were not designed this way. It is considered a flaw by some, such as myself, who have breached that trend. That is, if you think for yourself, that's an anomaly. And true, they're kind of, with the mantids on Mars, one of our subsidiary goals with going into their labyrinth, their beautiful labyrinth in a way, was to find the frequency key code that would allow us to own the whole race and make them do our bidding, bend them to our will, if you like. And in a similar way, and it's not that they're all of one mind, but like the mantids, they're more of a unified collective. And so they share a lot of the same frequency. And same with this, 6's, I would say his previous previous ownership, they're all kind of working under this one controlled frequency, and it leaves them without free will. And then he goes on to say, I do believe that in many cases time can mend. He means the past and future of our races. Mind you, I'm always working with the frequency that's coming in and noticing what I'm perceiving on a subtle level beyond the words, and always kind of being careful. The Galactic Guardians came in at some point during all this, who I will talk about. They're my guardians. They are on the light ship that I'm talk about this in a moment. I have trouble saying I'm part of that Light Alliance ship, but there you go. And they said, they said they're not, where is that? Sorry. Oh, here we go. Excuse me. We are, the Guardians, Galactic Guardians, as I call them, we are protecting you. You will be able to see and serve better in this way. So I think between my higher self and them, we had kind of orchestrated this meeting, or I had allowed this to come in order to learn certain things and to broaden my own maybe limited perspective. I would agree with that. Scrolling through some text here. Hang on. So, okay. Yeah, at some point he comes in, one day he says something about stargates being blocked. So they're trying to find a way to get away from these. The leadership is collapsing with the larger Orion Gray group, is my impression. I certainly don't know all there's to know, but that's my impression. And they're trying to figure out where to go. Hence, he asked me about whereabouts. And he says, messages are coming through, but we are not able to intercept them all. Communications are incomplete. We remain on standby in the atmosphere. Operations suspended, unsure of exit strategy. A battle wages on, but we are not part of that on standby. And I'm thinking, and of course, when I think something, it's saying something to him. Is this a kind of limbo? Yes, we await discussion and decisions. A new leader has been christened, deciding not to act. We are waiting. And I don't really feel like they're part of, I would call them he and his small group are a breakaway group. And I'm saying, well, where are you waiting? Interdimensional space has been made available to us in accordance with space law. He says, we await change. We will not be going back from whence we came. Time is different now. And I know that he means that time's qualities are different. How time operates is different now, which is an important point for us to seize also that moment in which time is different. And I also think that means that timelines can become more fluid and malleable. To this, he says, yes, how time operates, it is different. There are more loopholes, wormholes right now, and what you would call anomalies. I and others think that there is room for you to succeed. And I, thinking to him, of course, he's hearing that. Why are you telling me this? So that you can succeed. The hereafter, as you say, is not written in stone. There are scriptures and verses that relate to a second coming. You and I both, we want for this. In this, we become not enemies, but allies, so that there may be victory for all in the end. Yeah, and my senses of breakaway groups, and that the high command of the whole Orion group may be in disarray at this point. I don't know everything there is to know. Like I said, I'm not much of a prognosticator on these sorts of matters. But Six's group does seem to be one example of smaller units that are taking advantage of the chaos in leadership falling apart and able to go more their own way. Granted, since they haven't had that before, it would be difficult if you've been a slaved being, to find your own way. Like suddenly, if all the super soldiers are given freedom up there, what do like out on Mars, it would take us a few beats to figure out what our plan was next. I could sort of relate to that from that vantage point. Yes, what's happened and is happening, he says, is troublesome for some, but welcome for others. We repent. And I'm thinking, what is the biblical reference? Like, what's with that, dude? We know the meaning of ancient texts, he says, some of which were written in code. Some of those books were falsified. Some of our group helped with that, and he means the full Orion group. It was like lighting a match and fanning the flame. Others of us learned and aligned. I see this does surprise you, he says. We aligned with other things. It is as you have seen. Not all of us were meant for darkness. Some among us do seek the light and seek alliance with humanity. I bring this message to you today. Glory be the highest. Praise be the light of Christ. So he knows that we in the West respond to the analogy of Christ and the Christed light. And that's what he's getting at. And he says, you wonder if this is real, don't you? And yet, no matter in the end, I have delivered. There are the broken and the redeemed, and those who end and those who mend. That is all. And I will wrap this up with one little bit here. Some mornings later after this, I wake to not a thing you want to wake to. I had a big, nasty gray on my left. And at first I was like, God, is that Six? It wasn't Six. It was one of the leaders. He's very much a different sort of physicality, much stronger, vengeful, taller, bigger, vindictive, and I would say pissed off. And I'm getting immediately that he's wants to intimidate Six and I out of contact because he knows we're meeting in light. And the gist of it is that the being, I mean, this guy can't hurt me, and he's been rendered impotent, if you like, by all that's gone on. He's, what I wrote here in the journal is, he is powerless to change the coming light. Yeah, despite his threatening posture. He seems disgusted, perhaps even enraged. If such a thing would be possible for the Greys, that they could, any of them could align with a different trajectory. I said, I'm not wishing to open my mind to any telecommunications from him, so not sure if there's any verbal message other than keep apart and away from each other. Basically, that's the energy to me in Six. And then I hear, you know, I'm not a part of what happens next, but I can observe it. To Six, he says, this is not standard protocol. A war is being waged. Where are you? Where are the others? We will find you. You will not escape. So this is being telepathically conveyed from the tall gray leader to Six. It's a little cringeworthy there. So yeah, I could hear this and observe it without partaking. I was definitely not opening my mind to any telepathy with this former leader. So I think that's the essence of what I wanted to share there. It's sort of interesting, and how the purpose of sharing this, and I think the purpose for it coming through for me was very much about, like I said, opening my mind to a different possibility than the one I had been aware of, which was when the Greys come, or the Orion Greys. Not all Greys are Orion Greys. Phil Schneider, I think, even, I was listening to one of his, I think it might have been his last talk. Yeah. Blessings to Phil and his contribution to disclosure. He's no longer with us, as most of you will know. I think it was in his last talk, he said something to the effect that, yeah, some of those Greys, they do, you know, they want to give humanity a chance. So he spoke to this. He was in the Dulce shootout. You know, he was wounded by tall Greys. He was nearly killed by them. So again, the macro lens of my own life, you know, I'm being tasked with opening to another possibility for this race. And I think that the larger message may be being that if we are able to open our minds to a different solution or a different possibility, potentiality that maybe we couldn't see before because our minds were too limited in our own belief systems, which is, I mean, been true for me, certainly in many things. A belief system seems to me by nature begins and ends at a certain point, and there's an inherent limitation perhaps to that. So if we can see a potential that's bigger than the one we have now in any arena of your life, then you create that potential, because we are majestic creators, co-creators. Our thoughts and beliefs create our reality. So there you have maybe a bigger piece of a lesson there, if you will. That was certainly my takeaway about all of this. So just to reiterate too, that there's different kinds of Greys, and like when I was on the moon, it seemed like they were almost like drones, shorter worker drones, or some of them I would say even like our programmed life forms, PLFs, that don't have any, how would you say, a soul, an independent, more than being just controlled beings. They're just completely programmed. They're not really even, I almost want to say AI, kind of AI frequency there, is what I observed. And I feel like there's, you know, some Grey groups come back, trace their heritage back to Zeta Reticuli. Other groups are from other places. I don't claim to be the master of knowing really the beginning and end of that. It's so complex. I have shared that, like my father, is, well, Zeta hybrid, Zeta starseed. I think that's how he was, you know, I've said this before too, that I think that's how he was solving a lot of the tech equations he was given to solve at his work, you know, with his clearance work, as basically an aeronautical engineer for the military industrial complex. he was getting downloads from them and higher knowledge, higher tech intel, I think, from them. Kind of interesting. I do think that I have seen, back when I was looking into that aspect of my father's story, I was given a long vision and channel about a dark seed coming into Zeta Reticuli beyond human reckoning, like an archonic force that came in and disrupted an otherwise rather peaceful society. And they were basically made to leave and to exit Zeta Reticuli and migrated through the solar system, ended up over in our area, and the rest is history. But I do think that there's and I think this is out there. There's other people who have guides that are Zeta, and it's sort of dispensing with some of the idea that all grays are out to get us. Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering if I should read, in Dad's papers. I always go back and I'm talking about my father quite a lot, aren't I? It's because he's so pivotal and seminal in the reasons why I was taken into the programs. I've talked about this along the way, and since he died last year, about a year and a half ago, a little more than that, I guess. I've been able to discover more of who he was as such a mysterious person, and he left in his papers. This was kind of mind-blowing to me. A story that really, I didn't find this until after I'd received that vision and channel, about the story of Zeta Reticuli, at least in his own place of origin, that I just mentioned. And this story, maybe I will read it. It was handwritten on an old piece of computer paper back from the 1970s, and it had, where is it? It had a little crayon drawing of a spaceship that I or my brother made back in the day. I mean, really mind-blowing. Yeah, let me give this a go. It's so interesting how it resonates with the story of the Grace. And like I said, I'm like qualifying that all over the place, but as it pertains to his origin point, and I think a much more wisdomful and benevolent upper dimensional race of Zeta stock. So bear with me here. Someone I think out there will want to listen to this. So in my father's hand, from my father's mind, back in the 70s, he was working in all kinds of Black projects, and I was being ferried out to many of those projects. A very ancient and far superior race has advanced to the point of voluntary immortality, almost to the point of dimensionless existence. They are nearly without the cumbersome trappings of physical possessions, including bodies. In the midst of this intellectual splendor, basic human feelings are completely unknown. Greed, hate, jealousy, the list is endless in its variations. Into this seeming utopia comes a retrograde mutant who is found to possess all the old human qualities and whose intellect will not accept the need for change. He will not allow himself to be stripped, however gently, of the luxuries of avarice and hate. The utopian society of which he is a part cannot deprive one of its citizens of his right to life, and yet, since he refuses to change, there is but one alternative: exile. For a time, psychological exile is attempted, but his towering, albeit twisted, intellect feeds upon his circumstance like a cancer in a robust host. It flourishes exceedingly well. So well, in fact, that the host can no longer tolerate its present. At last, permanent physical exile is the only recourse. So the bad seed comes into this benevolent upper dimensional society and is forced to leave because it's carrying just too much darkness. Not wishing the exile the least physical harm, the society outfits his ship of exile with resplendent resources. A fond farewell is said to the exile, but the finest minds of the ancients have made very sure that the exile will never return by means known only to themselves. Within these circumstances, in eons of time by anyone's standards, the exile has wandered the universe. He has perfected wondrous technologies, created and discarded uncounted attempts at finding some relief from boredom. Finally, to his great relief, there hangs before him the third planet of an insignificant star, thousands of which he has visited, witnessed before. But this one claims his attention as no other ever has, for here is life beyond the protozoa. Here is rudimentary intelligence, and the first seed of despair is sown on this planet of innocence. So he finds Earth. This is about the Greys finding Earth. That was my interpretation. We're not done. Hang on. The exile wishes dominion over intelligence, and to this end, he studies these creatures patiently until at last his plan is commenced. There are failures, of course, which must be destroyed without trace, but finally, in a fertile valley of this third planet, the exile achieves his goal, sentient intelligent life. Created from the raw stock with a major change to conform to the image of the exile, including some intelligence and all the failings of the exile, the creation is complete. So, I mean, we could interpret that in a lot of ways, but I think I had found it not long after I'd received the initial vision and information about the long story of his soul's journey and his race as a Zeta, that there was so much overlap in that, like the bad seed leaving the utopian upper dimensional world and finding Earth and coming in and getting into its service to self machinations. I'm like, oh my God, when I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And it had I kind of want to run and get it. It's in the other room, the little spaceship. Just kind of blew my mind that either myself or my brother had drawn in black crayon. Really something. Yeah. So thank you. Like I said, I think that might be useful to somebody out there. Okay, the last bit, we're going into light. I'm going into some light here. I think I get embarrassed when I talk about this, so I don't talk about it much. When I was talking about the Galactic Guardians, they are that, and they're also I consider them as family on what I often call the Light Alliance ship. They're formally, we could call it part of the Galactic Confederation. I don't like to use that word so much, and I feel yeah, I feel a bit arrogant or something. Is that it? What is it? When I say that I have a Andromedan aspect on that ship. And if you watch my third episode, I think, is it the third one, Light Ships and Dark Ships, you'll know about Tyrion, who is my mate of a different kind, quite opposite of the twinning with Dean, is an actual mate on that ship. And he's from Procyon. But I function on that ship as a kind of arbiter. We could call it an arbiter of justice. And who better to serve that than somebody from a different galaxy that is impartial, or more impartial, if you like, to the situation here in the Milky Way within our solar system. But on that ship, we were very interested in the dealings of the galactic slave trade, which, if you listen to other material of mine, was very much a part of what I was used for, was aiding and abetting the galactic slave trade, both on Planet X and on the moon and within Dulce, the Dulce base. So let me unpack that a little bit on this beautiful mothership, which it's mostly Procyon, Syrian, Pleiadian beings, and there's others upon that ship. It's a living craft. It's like a living world inside the craft. And yeah, speaking of utopian existence, boy, there's some good frequencies for you. A lot of pastel colors and vibrations, energies, healing energies there. But it was for me to keep them on track, keep us on track with our higher mission, and like to remember what we're doing out here and not get off track and not get too one side or the other side, like getting imbalanced in our proclivities or our investments, or, you know, we're out here to observe, we're gathering intel about the slave trade, and then we're reporting back along with a lot of other ships to what would be a more central consortium, and making consensus-based decisions about any actions we might want to take as a result of information gained. But it was just like, I think you got me there. You know, I've got like a bunch of planets in Libra too in this lifetime. And so kind of see how this is playing out in my mission. Why all this in all this darkness and learning about it. You know, I volunteered from that ship to come down to Earth and be like, hey, I'll take that awful mission because I want us to figure out more things. You know, it's a brilliant move to come down and learn from within the belly of the beast, what is going on within the slave trade? What are they doing with the cloning, the experimentation, all the genetics manipulations, and who's benefiting? What are they trading, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, highly deviant material there. So yeah, it gives me, again, I'm always going back into the deeper perspective about the journey I chose in this embodiment as Rebecca, and also the journey of the soul, which I always say too, you know, I work in the Akashic Records as a full-time gig. And of course, we're always looking at that. Like what was I trying to learn or rectify or balance from maybe previous lifetimes as well? What are my interests and what are my lessons experientially to be in this round? And I've gained so much from that perspective. It's saved me. It saved my ass. Continues to. Yeah. I'm so appreciative of this amount of light that's also kind of counterbalances the exquisite darkness that I bring to the table here. There's also enormous amounts of light. And like, you know, I always see too that when we maybe write this into our script to experience whatever it may be, XYZ, in my case, you know, all these programs and horrific abuses, really, that we have the resources also built in to become well. We write into our script enormous support and guidance and assistance so that there can be healing. Oftentimes that is the case. So remember that if you're going through something like this or something that feels insurmountable, that you're probably also got the resources to work with it. I mean, we are humans, we're extraordinary. And that's why so many groups are after us, or have been, you know, wanting to use us and fetch our DNA and manipulate our minds and invert our sexuality. Because we're powerful. Yeah. Yeah. A couple little more bits here. Yeah. You know, I'd mentioned the guys in prison and Julian Assange, and a couple more notations on this. I was speaking of, you know, people giving testimonies and whistleblowers and truth tellers. I was also listening to going back through Gary McKinnon's findings, you know, back in almost 20 years ago now. He hacked into a bunch of government computers, I think almost 100 of them. I think this was in probably 2001, 2002, NASA government military computers, and found definitely relevant to SSP stuff, because he found a list of non-terrestrial officers. He found a big photograph of a cigar-shaped craft, and he also found a list of US spaceships. He didn't do prison time as far as I know. I think he was not extradited to the US, fortunately. But I think it was an interview with Richard Dolan, I think, that I was listening to. And again, something jogged loose in my head about just in my heart, maybe, about my father. When my father died, I mean, there's something really, the vibrational frequency being really somewhat similar to Gary. Kind of the mystery man, kind of on the spectrum. My dad was certainly that, although we didn't call it back that back in the 70s. When my father died, I found a bunch of hacking books in his bedroom, and no surprise, I'm like, did you write these yourself? You could have. And that night, after I'd watched, I was kind of catching up on the refreshing myself on the Gary info. I was out walking under the stars like I do, listening. And I said to my father, what were you looking for? What were you hacking? What was the information you wanted? I didn't expect an answer at all, but I did hear one out of the proverbial blue, the ethers, the other world. And he said, I was looking for myself. I wanted to know about my own files. We could take that as poetic rendering, right? He just wanted to know about the mystery that he was, the mysteries that he contained that he wasn't even aware of. That itself would point into, I've questioned how much was he mind controlled? How much, in the last video I said, how much did he know consciously about what he was selling me into? Did he know what would happen to me and all the things that I would suffer? Did he know? That question will linger for the rest of my life, burning into me. But I also think he may have been taken into the programs in more formal ways. So on one side, we could say he was working on things related to mind control, influencing with implants and satellite impulses sent to the implants, influencing mass psychology. This is kind of psychotronic that we're talking about. But was he taken off world? This I wonder. And when he said, I'm looking for my own files, that leaves me with another question. So as much as I know, I think I clearly illustrate that there's so much I don't know. There's just so much I don't know. And the questions are maybe a heavier bag than the answers. As such it is with these programs, though. We're used in so many ways, and we're manipulated, mind wiped, so we won't remember what happened to us. One little last bit. There's a few last bits. I think relevant to the broader way that my journey has unfolded, and again, relevant to wanting to do something about men in prison. Is there a way I can bring light into the prison system? Some years ago, I started teaching meditation and Dharma in prison. This was back in Colorado. And over that time, I remain in contact with an inmate. He's incarcerated in a nearby state. We have done correspondence, teaching and training in meditation and talking about the Dharma, and we could say the path of light, moving along the path of light and higher alignments. So it's been 5 years. I didn't learn of his crime until recently. It never came up, I thought I wouldn't push that. It wouldn't change. What he'd done wouldn't change the way that we were working together, which was through snail mail letters and also through video contact, like Zoom. It isn't Zoom, it's the prison system Zoom. But anyway, I learned recently that you can't make this up. You cannot make this up. He's in prison doing a long, long sentence for child rape, 1 count of child rape, 1 count of child sodomy, and 11 counts of possession of child pornography. I have to admit, this was another shocker for me. It's a little close to home. If you've listened to my last video, it's very close to home. Yeah. So it's how the universe presents me with the lessons that I need, and to resolve polarity. So I guess how I would parse this out is, bringing light into his mind, his heart. I don't think everyone who commits child sex abuse was necessarily abused themselves. But there's, if we look, we can see how there's inversions, like almost like a dark liquid injected into the human bloodstream, you know, that pervert us. They want to pervert our energies. And if you've been exposed to any kind of life on the planet, you know, that we're very susceptible and vulnerable to delusions and confusions, and, you know, especially if we're drinking or drugging, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, trying not to get too much in the how or why of that with him, but I think this will open up more of a, actually give us more, me knowing now what happened to him, because it's what happened to me. I'm working with a perpetrator. It's like this far away from him, in some ways energetically, it's like this far away from him being my own perpetrator. But it's helping, like me helping him. It's like we're helping to bridge the gap between victim and perp. And there's something, I think there's something beautiful. I sense it energetically coming, that we can help liberate this. It's not my job to liberate him at all, by any means. My job is to teach to the path of illumination and just help him with meditation. And he's on the right road. I mean, I can feel that even, you know, the first couple of years I was working with him. But isn't that something, again, this sort of shocking thing, that it could have been so many other crimes. So that's been another mind-blowing sort of recent discovery. And it's how my journey works. Like when I'm paying attention, when we pay attention to the cues and what we're here to resolve and what we're here to bring, what we're here to let go of, what we're here to surrender, what we're here to partake of in this beautiful elixir of human experience. Our teachers and our lessons are profound, and they're everywhere. And like I said, the resources are here within us to resolve everything. Yeah. So I wanted to, it's all connected. So all of this is rather connected. I think those are the last of my bits to share today. Oh my God. Yeah. On the nature of questions and answers. So my next video, I'm going to start answering some of your questions. And if you have, we'll do a Q&A. If you have questions about anything I've talked about in these videos, this whole series of bringing light to the darkness, or maybe anything I do as a channel, etc., put them in a, I would say probably not in the comments. I'm better likely to use them and see them if you send them to me at the contact link below. I will link my contact and you can put them on the form and send them. If you have something burning you want to know more information about, or a question, because I've waded through so many things. I mean, so much in all of this over time. And I know people, I've got a little list. I have a list started. There's lots. I mean, I have my own questions, but I can probably answer some of yours if that interests you. So please play along if that is something you want to do. Yeah, and subscribe to my channel. We're going to grow the channel. That is my hope. I always say I'm not great at self-promotion, but if you haven't subscribed and you want to, please do. Please do. Yeah, and thanks for being with me here. The light gone on our final day of 2021, and 2022 has harbingers of goodness and light written inside of it. And the light in our hearts, you know, is never dimmed, is it? So keep connected here. You can also order any kind of, if you're going into the new year and you're working on your own personal journey, your personal transformation, you can go to my website linked below and look at the different readings, inner child healings, galactic attunements, coaching, starseed coaching sessions, astral journeys, past life readings, and so on and so on. I think there's 9 different sessions that personal sessions that I offer right now. And with that, I think we'll dedicate the merit of the journey to the children and the children inside of us that we're all bringing home, and the innocence of our planet being restored. So I'm Sirius Blue. Thanks so much for being with me. And until next time, goodbye for now.